The rain fell heavily over the city that night. Cars rushed past flooded streets. People hid under umbrellas and hurried home. But near the old bus station, one man remained sitting alone. His clothes were soaked. His beard was untrimmed. His hands trembled from cold. Most people avoided looking at him. Some thought he was drunk. Others assumed he was dangerous. No one stopped, except one woman. Her name was Elena. Elena was a nurse at a small public hospital on the edge of town. She worked double shifts almost every week. Her salary barely covered rent, medicine for her sick mother, and school fees for her younger brother. Every month was a struggle. Yet despite everything, Elena still believed kindness mattered. That night, after finishing a 14-hour shift, she walked toward the bus stop with aching feet and tired eyes. Then she saw the homeless man collapse. People stepped around him. Nobody moved closer. Elena dropped her bag and rushed toward him. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man's lips were pale. His breathing was weak. She quickly checked his pulse. Too slow. "He needs help," she shouted. But the crowd only stared. One man shook his head. "Don't get involved." Another woman whispered, "These homeless people bring trouble." Elena ignored them. She removed her coat and covered the man. Then she called emergency services. But the operator said every ambulance nearby was already occupied because of the storm. It could take over an hour. An hour? The man might not survive that long. Elena looked around desperately. Then she made a decision that changed her life forever. "I'll take it myself." A taxi driver nearby refused at first. "He'll dirty my seats," he complained. Elena pulled out the little money she had left. "Please," she begged, "I'll pay extra." Reluctantly, the driver agreed. Inside the taxi, the homeless man drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, he weakly grabbed Elena's wrist. "Why? Are you helping me?" he whispered. Elena smiled softly. "Because someone should." The man stared at her as if he had forgotten those words existed. When they arrived at the hospital, Elena used her employee access to get him admitted immediately. Some doctors complained. Another unidentified homeless patient? "We already have no beds." But Elena refused to walk away. She cleaned his wounds herself. She stayed after her shift ended. She even bought medicine using her own money. The older nurse beside her sighed. "You care too much, Elena." Elena glanced toward the unconscious man. Maybe people don't care enough. Hours later, the man finally opened his eyes properly. The hospital room was small and quiet. Elena sat nearby, filling out paperwork. "You're awake," she said gently. The man looked confused. "Where am I?" "St. Mary's Hospital." He slowly sat up, wincing in pain. "You collapsed in the rain." The man looked down at the clean hospital gown. "You did all this?" Elena nodded. "You had a fever and severe exhaustion." For several seconds, the man said nothing. Then he asked quietly, "How much do I owe you?" Elena almost laughed. "Nothing. Nobody helps for nothing anymore." "Well," Elena replied, "maybe they should." The man studied her face carefully. There was something unusual about his eyes. Not fear, not weakness. Something deeper. Almost like sadness buried under years of silence. "What's your name?" Elena asked. The man hesitated. "Victor." "Do you have family, Victor?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not anymore." Elena didn't push further. Over the next few days, Victor slowly recovered. And every day, Elena checked on him. Sometimes she brought extra soup from the cafeteria. Sometimes they simply talked. Victor was different from what people expected. He spoke calmly, politely. He seemed highly educated. One evening, he noticed Elena secretly counting coins from her purse. "You're struggling financially," he observed. Elena quickly hid the money. "I'm managing." Victor looked unconvinced. "You paid for my medicine, didn't you?" "It wasn't much." "How much?" "It doesn't matter." Victor leaned back silently. Nobody had treated him with genuine kindness in years, not without wanting something in return. But Elena never asked questions, never demanded anything, and that disturbed him more than cruelty ever had. A week later, Victor was discharged. The hospital administration wanted the bed free immediately. Elena walked him outside. The sky was finally clear after days of rain. "So," Elena said awkwardly, "where will you go now?" Victor smiled faintly. "I'll figure something out." Elena bit her lip. Then she opened her worn wallet and handed him a small amount of cash. Victor stared at it in shock. "You need this more than I do." "Take it anyway." "Elena, you can repay me someday by helping someone else." Victor slowly accepted the money. For the first time in many years, his eyes became emotional. "You really believe people can still be good, don't you?" Elena shrugged. "I have to believe that." Victor nodded quietly. Then he walked away. Elena watched until he disappeared into the crowded street. She assumed she would never see him again. But 3 days later, something unbelievable happened. Elena arrived at work and immediately sensed tension in the hospital. Doctors whispered in corners. Nurses looked nervous. Luxury cars filled the parking lot outside. A senior administrator rushed through the hallway, adjusting his tie. "What's happening?" Elena asked. "You haven't heard?" Another nurse whispered excitedly. "He's here." "Who?" "The billionaire." Elena frowned. "What billionaire?" "The owner of a Vail Corporation, Victor Vail." Elena froze. The name hit her like lightning. Victor. No, it couldn't be. Suddenly, the hospital director appeared. "Elena, come with me immediately." Confused, Elena followed him upstairs toward the VIP conference room. Security guards stood outside. Inside, several wealthy executives sat around a polished table. And at the center of the room sat Victor. But he looked completely different. His hair was trimmed neatly. He wore an elegant black suit worth more than Elena earned in years. The homeless man was gone. Now he looked powerful, untouchable. Elena stopped breathing for a moment. Victor slowly stood. Their eyes met. And then he smiled. Not the smile of a billionaire, but the smile of the man she had helped in the rain. The room fell silent. One executive whispered nervously, "Sir, is this the nurse?" Victor never looked away from Elena. "Yes," he said softly. "She's the one who saved my life." Elena stood frozen. Her mind raced wildly. This impossible man, this homeless stranger, was actually one of the richest people in the country. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Because Victor hadn't come back to thank her. He had returned for something far more shocking. And Elena was about to discover the truth that would change both their lives forever. The conference room remained silent. Elena could barely process what she was seeing. Victor Vail, owner of one of the largest technology and construction companies in the country, a billionaire, the same man she had found unconscious in the rain. The hospital director suddenly laughed nervously. "Miss Elena has always been one of our best nurses." Elena glanced at him in disbelief. Just days earlier, the same director had complained about wasting resources on Victor. Now his entire attitude had changed. Victor noticed it too. His expression became cold for a brief moment. Then he turned back to Elena. "Would you sit down?" Elena slowly sat across from him. The expensive room felt unreal. Crystal glasses, marble floors, executives in tailored suits, and her worn-out shoes beneath the table. One businessman smiled politely. "Mr. Vail has spoken highly of your compassion." Elena didn't know what to say. Victor folded his hands calmly. "You saved my life. I only did my job." "No," Victor replied softly. "You did far more than that." The executives exchanged curious glances. Clearly, none of them had ever heard Victor speak emotionally about anyone. For years, the media described him as distant, ruthless, and impossible to impress. Yet now, he looked at Elena with genuine respect. Victor opened a small envelope and slid it toward her. Inside was a check. Elena's eyes widened instantly. It was enough money to change her entire life. Enough to pay her mother's medical treatment. Enough to clear debts. Enough to buy a home. Her hands trembled slightly. "I can't accept this." The director almost choked in shock. Victor studied her carefully. "Why not?" "Because kindness shouldn't come with a price." The room went silent again. One executive whispered under his breath, "Unbelievable! Victor leaned back slowly. For the first time in years, someone had refused his money. Most people spent their lives trying to get close to him, but Elena looked genuinely uncomfortable. Victor suddenly smiled faintly. That answer tells me I was right about you. Elena frowned. Right about what? Victor paused. Then he said something nobody expected. The night you found me was an accident. The air in the room changed instantly. Elena blinked in confusion. What do you mean? Victor stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the city. For the last 3 years, he began quietly, I've been searching for one honest person. Nobody interrupted him. My company became larger than I ever imagined. But the richer I became, the more fake people surrounded me. His voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. Executives lied. Friend betrayed me. Even my own relatives only cared about money. He looked down at the streets below. So I disappeared. One executive lowered his eyes awkwardly. Victor continued. I dressed like a homeless man and lived on the streets for several weeks. Elena stared at him in disbelief. I wanted to see how people behave when they think someone has nothing to offer. A bitter smile crossed his face, and what I found was disappointing. People ignored him, insulted him, humiliated him. Restaurants threw him out. Stores treated him like trash. Even charities often cared more about publicity than people. But then, Victor said softly, turning toward Elena, I met you. Elena struggled to speak. So you tested people? At first, yes. Victor's expression darkened slightly. But the storm that night was real. I actually collapsed. If you hadn't stopped, I might truly have died. The room became quiet again. Elena looked down. Part of her felt angry. Another part felt deeply sad for him. No one should have to pretend to be homeless just to learn who cares, she said quietly. Victor looked at her for several seconds. That's exactly why you're different. One of the executives cleared his throat. Sir, perhaps we should discuss the partnership proposal. Victor nodded slightly. Then he turned back to Elena. There's something I want to offer you. Elena immediately shook her head. I already told you I don't want money. It's not money. Victor placed a folder on the table. Elena opened it carefully. Her eyes widened. Inside were architectural plans for a new medical center. A large one, modern equipment, emergency housing, free treatment programs. At the top of the page were the words, the Elena Care Foundation. Elena looked stunned. Victor spoke calmly. You once said maybe people don't care enough. He stepped closer. So let's prove they still can. Tears filled Elena's eyes before she could stop them. You want to build this? I already bought the land. The executives nodded. One added, construction begins next month. Elena covered her mouth in disbelief. This center will provide free treatment for homeless people, low-income families, and abandoned elderly patients, Victor explained. No publicity stunts. No hidden fees. He paused. And I want you to run it. Elena almost laughed from shock. Me? You're the first person in years I've trusted. The hospital director suddenly interrupted. Mr. Vale, with respect, Elena lacks management experience for such a major. Victor's cold glance silenced him instantly. She has something more valuable than experience, Victor replied. Humanity. The room fell silent again. Elena looked overwhelmed. This is too much. No, Victor said softly. This is finally something meaningful. For years, Victor had built skyscrapers, luxury hotels, and billion-dollar projects. But none of them made him feel fulfilled. Helping Elena create the medical center felt different, real, and for the first time in years, Victor felt hope again. But not everyone shared that feeling. Across the city, inside a luxurious office filled with expensive paintings, a woman watched the news carefully. Her name was Vanessa Vale, Victor's younger sister. And the moment she heard about Elena, her expression turned dark. Vanessa had spent years waiting to inherit control of Victor's empire. But recently, Victor had become unpredictable. He stopped attending elite events, stopped trusting investors, stopped listening to family. And now, suddenly, a poor nurse had appeared in his life. Vanessa immediately sensed danger. Find out everything about her, she ordered her assistant. I want her full background by tonight. Meanwhile, Elena returned home completely overwhelmed. Their apartment building was old and damaged. The elevator barely worked. As she entered, her younger brother Matteo looked up from the kitchen table. "You're late." Elena smiled weakly. "You won't believe the day I had." Her mother coughed softly from the next room. Medical bills sat piled beside old medicine bottles. Elena stared at them silently. For years, she had prayed for a miracle. Now one had appeared. But something about it terrified her, because people with money and power often came with complications. And deep down, she sensed Victor carried painful secrets far beyond wealth. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying everything in her mind. Victor's eyes, his loneliness, his strange sadness. Then her phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." For a moment, silence. Then Victor's voice. "I'm sorry for calling late." Elena sat up slightly. "Is everything okay?" "No," he admitted quietly. There was exhaustion in his voice again. Not the voice of a billionaire. The voice of the man from the rain. "I just realized something tonight," Victor continued. "What?" "You were the first person in years who spoke to me like I mattered before knowing who I was." Elena's expression softened. Outside her window, rain began falling again, softly this time. "Victor," she said gently, "money can buy almost everything." "But not sincerity," he replied. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Elena smiled faintly. "Well, maybe now you finally found it." Victor quietly laughed. A real laugh, small but genuine, and neither of them realized it yet. But at that exact moment, something far deeper than gratitude had already begun to grow between them. Something that would soon be tested by betrayal, greed, and a secret from Victor's past that could destroy everything. The following weeks changed Elena's life completely. Construction for the Elena Care Foundation began faster than anyone expected. News channels covered the story everywhere. The billionaire and the nurse. The homeless experiment that shocked the nation. A new hope for the forgotten. People across the country became fascinated by Elena, but fame made her uncomfortable. At the hospital, some co-workers suddenly treated her differently. A few became friendly overnight. Others grew jealous. One nurse whispered behind her back, "She got lucky." Elena pretended not to hear it, because deep down, she knew something important. Victor's money had opened doors, but compassion was what created the opportunity in the first place. Meanwhile, Victor spent more time with Elena than anyone expected. Sometimes they visited the construction site together. Sometimes they shared quiet dinners after long work days. And slowly, Victor began revealing pieces of himself he had hidden for years. One evening, they stood on the rooftop of a half-finished building overlooking the city lights. Victor rested his arms against the railing. "Do you know what's strange?" he asked. "What?" "I've attended parties with presidents, celebrities, and billionaires." He looked toward her. "But talking to you feels more meaningful than all of them." Elena smiled faintly. "That's because I don't care about your money." "I know." There was warmth in his eyes now, a warmth that hadn't existed when she first met him. But happiness rarely arrives without resistance. And Vanessa Vale was preparing her move. Inside her luxury penthouse, she threw a newspaper across the table angrily. The front page showed Victor and Elena standing together at the foundation site. "She's turning him against the family." Vanessa snapped. Her lawyer adjusted his glasses nervously. "Technically, Mr. Vale controls most company shares already." Vanessa's expression darkened. "Not if he's declared mentally unstable." The lawyer froze. That would create a public scandal. "I don't care." Vanessa walked toward the window. "My brother disappeared for weeks pretending to be homeless. Investors already think he's becoming irrational." She turned sharply. "And now he's giving away millions because of a nurse he barely knows." Her voice became cold. "If Elena disappears from his life, everything returns to normal." Meanwhile, Elena's mother finally began receiving proper treatment through Victor's private doctors. For the first time in years, her condition improved. Matteo also received a scholarship funded anonymously. Although Elena suspected Victor immediately, one afternoon, she confronted him playfully. "You're secretly helping my family again." Victor looked innocent. "I have no idea what you mean." "Victor," a small smile appeared on his face, "I simply dislike seeing good people suffer." Elena shook her head, laughing softly. But then her expression became serious. "You can't solve every problem with money." Victor's smile faded slightly. "I know." And he truly did know, because despite all his wealth, there was still one wound money had never healed. That same evening, Victor finally revealed the truth about his past. They sat together inside the unfinished foundation building. Construction sounds echoed faintly outside. Victor stared quietly at the floor before speaking. "I had a daughter once." Elena's heart tightened instantly. Victor rarely spoke about personal matters. "What happened?" For several seconds, he couldn't answer. Then finally, "She died 11 years ago." Elena's breath caught. Victor's voice became distant. "She was sick, very sick." He swallowed hard. "I had all the money in the world, the best doctors, the best hospitals." Pain filled his eyes, and none of it saved her. Elena slowly reached for his hand. Victor continued quietly. "After she died, I buried myself in work. I became colder every year." He looked at Elena. "Until the night you helped me." Elena understood now. Victor wasn't searching for kindness because he was lonely. He was searching for proof that humanity still existed, because losing his daughter had destroyed his faith in people and in life itself. "You remind me of her sometimes," he admitted softly. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not because of the comparison, but because she finally understood how broken he truly was. At that moment, their connection became something deeper than friendship, not built on wealth, not built on gratitude, but built on healing. However, Vanessa's plan was already in motion. 2 days later, a shocking news article exploded across social media. "Billionaire manipulated by nurse." Did Elena target Victor Vale for his fortune? Insiders questioned her motives. Elena stared at the headlines in horror. Fake photos, twisted stories, false accusations. Reporters suddenly surrounded her apartment building. Neighbors whispered. Even the hospital temporarily suspended her pending investigation. Elena sat inside her small apartment trembling with shock. "This isn't real," Matteo said angrily. But Elena already knew who was behind it. Victor arrived less than an hour later. For the first time since she met him, he looked furious. This was Vanessa. Elena looked exhausted. "Victor, maybe this is all becoming too much." His expression changed instantly. "You want to leave?" "I don't know." Victor stepped closer. "Don't let them destroy what we're building. But your family." "My family stopped acting like family a long time ago." The room became quiet. Then Victor did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Elena stared at it in confusion. Victor opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver ring. Not enormous, not flashy, elegant, meaningful. Elena looked stunned. "Victor, I'm not asking because you saved me." His voice shook slightly. "I'm asking because when I was at my lowest, you saw me as human." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I spent years surrounded by people who loved my money," Victor continued. "But you cared about me when you thought I had nothing." He took a slow breath. "And that's the kind of person I want beside me for the rest of my life." Elena could barely speak. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows again, just like the night they first met. But this time, everything was different. Victor wasn't alone anymore, and neither was she. Elena smiled through tears. "Yes." Victor closed his eyes briefly in relief. Then he laughed softly, a genuine, peaceful laugh Elena had never heard before. But the biggest twist came the following morning, because Victor held a massive press conference. Reporters filled the room expecting scandal. Instead, Victor walked on stage beside Elena and made an announcement that stunned the entire country. "I am transferring 70% of my personal fortune," he declared calmly, "into a permanent humanitarian trust." The room erupted with chaos. Cameras flashed everywhere. The reporters shouted questions. Victor raised his hand. This foundation will build hospitals, shelters, rehabilitation centers, and free clinics across the country. He looked toward Elena proudly. And Elena will lead it. Vanessa watched the broadcast from her penthouse in disbelief. Everything she wanted was slipping away, not to greed, not to manipulation, but to kindness. And that was the one thing she never understood. Months later, the Elena Care Foundation officially opened. Hundreds of struggling families arrived on the first day. Homeless veterans, single mothers, elderly patients abandoned by relatives. And every single person received care. No cameras, no publicity tricks, just humanity. One afternoon, Elena walked through the lobby and noticed an elderly homeless man sitting alone near the entrance. People passed him without looking. Elena immediately walked over with a warm smile. "Sir, can I help you?" Victor watched from nearby, quietly. Then he smiled, because in that moment, he realized something powerful. The world changes not because of billionaires, but because of ordinary people who choose compassion when everyone else walks away. And years later, when people told the story of Victor Vale and Elena, they always focused on the millionaire twist. But Victor himself knew the real truth. The greatest treasure he ever found was not love, not wealth, not success. It was a rainy night when one exhausted nurse stopped walking and chose kindness instead.